U.S. nuclear cable bombers flew over the Sea of Japan alongside Japanese fighter jets. Tokyo calls it show of force, following Chinese and Russian drills around Japan and South Korea. The U.S. has seized a sanctioned oil tanker off of the coast of Venezuela. This has sent oil prices higher and has sharply escalated tensions between Washington and Caracas. U.S. President Donald Trump has launched fast-track U.S. visas to wealthy foreigners who can pay $1 million. The card will give buyers a direct path to citizenship for all qualified and vetted people. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov has said that all misunderstandings with the United States over Ukraine had been resolved following a meeting earlier this month between President Vladimir Putin and U.S. envoy Steve Witkoff amid escalation on the war fronts. NATO chief Mark Rutte meets German Chancellor Friedrich Merz and Foreign Minister John Wadepo. The talks in the German capital come amid tensions with the U.S. as reports suggest a leak of 200,000 liters of oil has been sealed in Brandenburg. Meanwhile, German Defense Minister Boris Pistorius is to host French counterpart. Iceland has pulled out of Eurovision 2026, joining several countries in a boycott protesting Israel's participation. Its broadcaster has said that Israel's inclusion has created disunity and believes no joy or peace would come from taking part. U.S. House of Representatives passes a staggering $900 billion defense policy bill in a move that reshapes the world's most powerful military machine, while tightening the leash on its leadership. Renewed clashes erupt along the Cambodia-Thailand border, with heavy fighting reported near ancient temples ahead of a planned call from President Trump. Both sides remain locked in conflict as expectations rise that Washington may try to broker another ceasefire. Now for this hour, we start with Europe. German Chancellor Friedrich Merz has said that U.S. President Donald Trump has been sent a proposal on territorial concessions that Ukraine is ready to make to end its war with Russia. Merz has said the proposal was sent after European leaders had spoken by phone with Trump on Wednesday. A first U.S. plan that involved Ukraine surrendering land that Russia has not captured was seen by Kyiv and its European allies as caving into too many of Russia's hardline demands, as has since been revised. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has ruled out the possibility of ceding any territory to Russia. Zelensky has noted that Ukrainian law, the constitution, and international legal norms all prohibit territorial concessions. He has reaffirmed that the country's forces are fighting specifically to prevent such losses. Now for this discussion, we welcome Professor Andrew Latham. He's an international affairs expert, joins us live from Minneapolis. Now, what more can you tell us about the changing nature of this? At first it was 28 points peace plan and then 27, and now how does it look like? What's your analysis?
Well, I think the gap between the two parties, the two principal parties, is narrowing, but there are still some huge issues. You just mentioned one, the concessions of territory on the part of Ukraine, but there are others as well, the size of Ukraine's armed forces, future membership in NATO and things like that, the maximalists on the Ukrainian side and the maximalists on the Russian side simply don't see eye to eye, but there are other parties that are inching closer together. I think Chancellor Merz's comments are meant to signal a few different constituencies, one of which is Donald Trump. Hey, we're serious about this. One of which is the European people. We're running out of materiel, arms, ammunition, etc. We're running out of political will. The Russians are winning on the battlefield, grindingly, slowly, but they're winning. We're going to have to make some concessions to Russia. And the final signal is being sent to Zelensky, which is the same. Your maximalist aims of retaining and regaining all of your territory are non-starters. It's not going to happen. You're going to have to make some territorial concessions and other broader concessions regarding the post-war security architecture of Europe. And you're simply going to have to get real at this moment. And so it's signaling three different constituencies, but the message is the same. The developments on the battlefield have shifted to the point where territorial concessions are going to have to be made.
So if these are made and Russia loses nothing but gains territory, is it fair to say that Russia has won this war then?
Well, the parents and sisters and brothers and children of the 1.2 million Russians who have been killed or gravely injured in this war, I'm not sure that they would call it a victory. Geopolitically, it will be a victory for the Russians. They will have achieved, if they get big chunks of the Donbass, Donetsk, Luhansk, Zaporozhye, and Kherson, etc., and also Crimea, recognized internationally as part of the Russian Federation, they will have achieved most of their war aims. If they prevent Ukraine from joining NATO, that's another war aim that they will have achieved. That's still up in the air, but I doubt NATO will welcome Ukraine. It's for a variety of reasons. And so, yes, unfortunately, in war, there are typically victors and vanquished. And Ukraine is likely to end up on the vanquished side of the ledger, and Russia is likely to end up on the victor side.
Thank you very much, Professor Latham, for sharing that insight. Please stay with us as we move on to our next news. Now, moving on, the UN fact-finding mission has found that Venezuela's Bolivarian National Guard, or GNB, has committed serious human rights violations and crimes against humanity over more than a decade. The independent report highlights arbitrary detentions, torture, and sexual violence targeting political opponents, often with impunity under President Nicolas Maduro's government. Victims were reportedly chosen or their opposition to the administration. The mission described a pattern of systematic repression, including the 2024 post-election knock-knock raids, which targeted ordinary citizens in poor neighborhoods. This comes as U.S.-Venezuela tensions escalate, with Washington warning of possible military action over drug trafficking, which it calls narco-terrorism. Venezuelan President Maduro rejects these claims, accusing the U.S. of trying to seize Venezuela's oil. Marta Balinas, head of the UN Commission, has said that the abuses, including assaults and rape, form a consistent pattern intended to punish and break victims. Now, for this discussion, we welcome back Professor Andrew Latham. He's an international affairs expert, joins us live from Minneapolis. Thank you very much, Professor, for staying with us. Now, after this, again, a scandal, not scandal, but these reports coming in, how do you think this will be seen by other countries? And also, what do you think this will be affecting the Venezuelan government going forward?
Well, I think that the finding that this is systematic, and it's grave crimes against humanity is going to provide Europeans and others who are in favor of a democratic transition in Venezuela with more ammunition. Whether that gives them leverage to intensify sanctions or whatnot, it's certainly going to embolden them. Venezuela's neighbors are more concerned, I think, with stability. They don't want massive migrations. They're already facing that, and it's very disruptive in the region. They're willing to turn, to a certain extent, a blind eye to the Maduro regime as long as there is a relative tranquility in the region. The two exceptions to that are Guyana and Colombia, both of which have territorial disputes with the Maduro regime. So the finding really is, and it's going to embolden Machado as well, the Nobel Prize laureate, who is the leader of the opposition in Venezuela. It's going to embolden her as well. She can now say, we're not alone. We have the UN actually is finding that the Maduro government is committing grave crimes against humanity, is therefore illegitimate, and therefore ought to go. So this is not just another report that comes out of an international bureaucracy. I think this has real political weight and is likely to tip the scales against the Maduro regime decisively. I'm not sure, but it's certainly tipping the scales.
Yes, and what are the political implications of this U.S. framing its tensions with Venezuela as a fight against narco-terrorism, and how do you think these state-sponsored repression tactics, such as the reported knock-knock raids, How do you think this affects the legitimacy of a government?
Well, it can't enhance the legitimacy. Obviously, it undermines the legitimacy. It depends on with which constituencies. The supporters of Maduro are going to turn a blind eye to this. The opponents, both domestically and internationally, are going to say, see, we told you so. This is an illegitimate regime that needs to go. On the American side right now, this current president is making, and his supporters are claiming that the Maduro regime is entangled with, deeply intertwined with, the narco traffickers, that it is a narco-terrorist state. It's not just turning a blind eye to narco trafficking, it's implicated in it and derives a certain amount of power and political leverage from its relationship with the narco traffickers. So this finding is likely to play into the hands of the Trump administration, which wants to paint this as a very illegitimate regime and therefore, ... fill in the blanks, probably involving some kind of military action. It's likely to embolden the domestic opposition. It's likely to embolden the Europeans and others who really want to see a democratic transition. It is, as I said earlier, not necessarily decisive, but it's non-trivial in its political impact.
Thank you very much, Professor Andrew Latham, for sharing that insight from Minneapolis. Please stay with us as we come back to you for our next discussion as well. Now we stay on Venezuela. Venezuelan opposition leader Maria Corina Machado has expressed hope that her country could become a beacon of hope and democracy in her first public appearance since being awarded the Nobel Peace Prize. Machado, who had been living in hiding for over a year due to a decade-long travel ban imposed by Venezuelan authorities, secretly traveled to Oslo. She was unable to attend the award ceremony earlier in the day. However, Machado appeared on the balcony of Oslo's Grand Hotel, where Nobel laureates typically stay, greeting dozens of supporters. She waved, sang the Venezuelan national anthem with the crowd, and was filmed by attendees waving Venezuelan flags.
Freedom is an individual decision, a rational decision. And it's the sum of these individual conscious decisions that bring that collective ethos that creates the force, the strength, and the courage to fight for freedom, to defend it when you got it. And that courage comes from the things that truly matter in your life, the things that you love. And when you feel that those things are most in danger, then the courage increases. That's why I am convinced that peace ultimately is an act of love. And I believe there's no other generation in the history of Venezuela that loves more freedom or family and our soul or territory, the possibility of actually being in your homeland, in moving freely in your homeland, because we have lost that. And as I mentioned to you, the force that brought this country, our nation together, was this longing that we want our children back home. And we will not stop until they do that. And we give them a country in which they can live with dignity, with justice, and the responsibility that comes with freedom.
Now for this discussion, we welcome back Professor Andrew Latham. He's an international affairs expert, joins us live from Minneapolis. Thank you very much, Professor, for staying with us. Now looking at this, how significant is this, the fact that she was in hiding but showed up in Oslo?
Well, it shows that the police state isn't in Venezuela is not as effective as it might be. They might have intercepted her at some point, but she managed to evade them and show up on that balcony. And again, signaling to various constituencies, one of which is back home in Venezuela. Look, there is hope. The international community is watching. There's a recognition now, to tie back into the UN fact-finding mission story, a recognition that this is an illegitimate regime, that it is perpetrating crimes against humanity. And this is the note that she struck, which was one of hopefulness, that the refugees and asylum seekers that have spread to the United States, but also to Venezuela's Latin American neighbors, can come home. And that may have another galvanizing effect politically within Venezuela. Is this going to drive Maduro out of office? Not by itself, but as part of a broader strategy of mobilizing domestic and international political forces to oppose him. I think it's an important part of a bigger picture, yes.
100%. And how do you think now, what's next for her? Do you think she'll be able to go back like how she came as well?
Well, that's a tricky one, because on the one hand, she's so high profile now that it would seem counterproductive for the Maduro regime to go after her and, knock raid and arrest her and subjugate her to the usual repressive techniques of police state like Venezuela's. On the other hand, if he has the opportunity, he may think, oh, I can take her as a chess piece, I can take her off the board, and we don't have to worry about her anymore. So if I were, mercifully I'm not, but if I were Maduro, I'd have a hard choice to make if she decided to come home. Let her come home, continue making the pro-democracy noises that she makes, and try to ignore her, or take her off the board permanently with all of the international and domestic repercussions that would be entailed in that. So remains to be seen. Stay tuned. If I were her, I don't think I'd stay in. I think I would stay in Norway.
Same. Me too. With that, I would like to thank Professor Andrew Latham for joining us today and sharing that insight throughout our news. Thank you very much. Now, moving on back to Asia, China's foreign ministry has said that the country's joint drills with Russia in the skies and seas around Japan and South Korea are part of the two countries' annual cooperation plan, demonstrating both sides' determination to maintain regional peace and stability. The comments come as U.S. nuclear-capable bombers fly past over the Sea of Japan alongside Japanese fighter jets and separate Chinese aircraft carrier drills that prompted Japan to scramble jets that Tokyo said were targeted by radar beams. The flight of two U.S. B-52 strategic bombers with three Japanese F-35 stealth fighters and three F-15 air superiority jets is the first time the U.S. has asserted its military presence since China began military exercises in the region last week. Let's have a look at what Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson has shared.
关于中俄联合巡航的情况，中国国防部已经发布了有关的消息，我们昨天也已经做出了回应。我想再次强调的是，此次中俄联合空中战略巡航是年度合作计划的项目。 展示了双方共同应对地区安全挑战、维护地区和平稳定的决心与能力。日方没必要大惊小怪，对好。
Now for this discussion, we welcome Mr. Andrew K. Long. He's an independent China strategist, joins us live from Hong Kong. Thank you very much, Mr. Andrew, for joining us again. Good to see you. Now, if I recall correctly, I think it's been almost 4 weeks since newly elected Japanese Prime Minister made that comment. What do you think? What's the situation now? It seems like it's escalating again.
Well, it's again a case of action and reaction on both sides of this conflict, because the East China Sea and of course the South China Sea is a very important theater for the strategic rivalry between the United States and China. And with the release of the recent national security strategy, the United States is not walking back away from Asia Pacific, but rather instead is doubling down on its military assets in the first island chain centered in Okinawa. And apart from its second island chain centered in Guam, but also trying to consolidate the American allies like Japan and South Korea. Don't forget there are military personnel, American military personnel stationed in these two countries. Together with American allies like the Philippines, again there is a defense treaty with the United States to contain China. And then, of course, down south of the South China Sea, you have the AUKUS, Australia, nuclear power submarine deal with the United Kingdom. This is not to say that the United States, of course, putting all the chips in the Asia Pacific, because in the same national security strategy, President Trump also highlighted the sanctity of the Western Hemisphere, reviving the Monroe Doctrine. But against this background, of course, you have the Prime Minister Nakaichi's recent provocative remarks, signaling a rise of Japanese militarism, which of course rattles Beijing. And of course, Beijing have recently, with this military drills, resulting in the close flyover of Japanese aircraft. Again, the Chinese side responded by locking its radar on Japanese fighter planes. And of course, Trump also spoke to Takaichi earlier, presumably not to warning the Japanese Prime Minister not to put the spanner in the works, because what American wants in the Asia Pacific Philippines, and hence because of this recent conflict resulting in the locking of a fighter jet radar on Japan, the Trump administration want to send a clear signal to Japan that Japan would have the United States backing, and hence this recent display of American power in nuclear capable bombers, together with flying together with Japanese aircraft, just to send a signal to Beijing that the United States remains Japan's staunch partner. But that doesn't mean that American wants war. It doesn't mean that American wants Japan to stir the pot too much. But again, is balancing, is signaling to Beijing that sort of the United States alliance with Japan cannot just be taken for granted.
Yes, and what do you think, where does South Korea lie over here in terms of, like U.S. taking or kind of messaging what you said through this flying of, sending this particular, I think it was missile to this area, and then Russia and China doing this drill. Where do you think South Korea lies over here?
I think that the drill is not threatening South Korea that much, because the involvement of the Russians is also to showcase the United States. Of course, there is a proxy war over Ukraine against Russia's influence in Europe or expansionism in Europe. But Russia also has is trying to form a closer partnership with China. Apart from the fact that the economies on both countries are intertwined, Russia being the world's largest exporter of energy and also agricultural products, China is the world's biggest customer. Apart from that, both countries are regarded as enemies of the United States, and so that pushed the two countries closer together. And this joint exercise with Russia is the demonstration of the so-called all-weather partnership. It doesn't mean that China or Russia would form a solid bloc, but it does mean that there are areas where they both would cooperate with one another or united with one another against what is to be perceived to be American aggression against both countries' interests.
Right. With that, I would like to thank Mr. Andrew K.P. Long for joining us today as an independent China strategist from Hong Kong and sharing that insight. Thank you very much. Now, moving on to UK, British novelist Sophie Kinsella, the best-selling author of the Shopaholic series, has passed away at the age of 55. Kinsella, whose real name was Madeleine Wickham, has sold more than 50 million books worldwide, including the hugely popular series about a shopping-addicted young woman living in London, which was later adapted into a movie. The author was diagnosed with glioblastoma, an aggressive form of brain cancer, in 2022. A statement posted on her Instagram account said she died peacefully, with her final days filled with her true loves family, music, and warmth, as well as Christmas and joy. It added that despite her illness, which she faced with unimaginable courage, Sophie felt truly blessed to have the love of her family and friends and to have experienced the extraordinary success of her writing career. That's all we have time for. Keep watching NewsX World for more news updates from around the world.